Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're joining us from today. I have Asha Lee here and myself, of course, Florence. We are going to be talking today about international student obligation and PGWP eligibility in Canada. I'm just going to let Asha do intros here before we get into it. We have a very short time, so we want to get into everything we want to talk about.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. Looking forward to today's session. So, I think this is a very, very, very important session that we're having today for our international students. I remember a former client of mine had given me a call when she arrived in Canada, and she said to me, "Hi, Aisha, I'm here." And I was like, "I'm so happy for you. Are you aware of the conditions on your study permit?" And she goes, "Yeah, I know the conditions. You mean the ones that are printed on the permit that say you can't work in certain sectors?" And I was like, "Yeah, those, but I mean like the actual conditions." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And that's when I realized a lot of people are just under the impression only what's printed on their permit is their conditions, but there's actually so much more. So I'm happy that we can have this session today to kind of go over everything and make sure all of our international students are aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And we decided to do this session too because, of course, internally we see a lot of inquiries, we see a lot of cases, and a lot of people are running into trouble. And I always tell people that have been around long enough to see that the climate has changed with immigration. When you don't comply with your study permit regulations while you're a student, it complicates everything for you going forward. It's difficult even when you get out of status to even apply to get back into status right now with the number of international students in Canada and of course the government trying to reduce that number. The slightest thing that you do wrong is an opportunity for them to just say, get out of here, right? So you need to be very careful and really comply with the regulations. So what we're going to do here for everyone that's listening, we're going to focus on talking about the content, the details that we want to share with you. And at the end of it, we will take questions. So that way, maybe your question might be answered as we're going through. So listen through as we go ahead here. So these are the things we're going to be talking about, of course, international students obligation and then PGWP. And these are the topics we're going to be covering today to keep you informed on what the expectations are. So we're going to start out here. Asha is going to start out with enrolling as a full-time student. What does that mean and what are you supposed to?
Perfect. Okay, so enrolled as a full-time student or actively pursuing your studies. So when it comes to maintaining the conditions on your study permit, IRCC wants to see that you're making reasonable progression towards completing your studies, whether that is maintaining a part-time load or maintaining a full-time load. Either of them is allowed in terms of maintaining the conditions on your study permit. However, this is one of the one of the gray areas that a lot of people are not aware of. Yes, you can be a part-time student and meet the conditions of your study permit. However, if you're a part-time student throughout your studies, it's going to become a problem for you when it comes time to apply for your PGWP. Right? So technically, if you're looking to extend your study permit and you're part-time, you've met your conditions. However, in the long term, it's not advisable. So the best thing that you can do is maintain a full-time course load. It's very important that you connect with your school. Different schools have different full-time course loads. So whether that's 3 courses or 4 courses or 5 courses, it's going to be different across every single school. So what you want to do is ensure that you maintain your full-time course load in every single semester. I cannot stress this enough. Don't take part-time one semester and full-time the next semester and then back to part-time and full-time. Maintain your full-time studies throughout each semester, aside from when you're on an excluded break. So whether that's like your reading week or your holidays or anything like that, then you're fine. But and then for summer sessions as well, that's something you need to talk to your school about. Some schools and some programs consider summer sessions to be a part of the academic year. Some of them don't. So it's really important that you're well informed with what your school considers to be full-time. And then that way you can ensure that you're maintaining your full-time course load.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And there's also one exception that I should mention there too is if you're in your final year of studies and you've taken all your classes and that final semester has to be part-time, that's acceptable under the immigration law. So that's the one exception. Aside from that, just ensure that you're full-time in all regular semesters that you have for your program. Authorized leave from school. This has put a lot of people in trouble. IRCC allows international students to take up to 150 days off school with approval from the school. And so if you're taking a break, you can't continue school for whatever reason, you can take up to 150 days. But it's not just taking 150 days and saying, I just said 150 days, I'm fine, I'm not going to school for 150 days. No, your school needs to be aware and actually approve that. If you want to ensure that you don't get in trouble with IRCC, you want to ensure that you get that approval in writing from your school. It is so important. Because when you're going to be applying for your PGWP or applying to extend your status, the officers, one of the important documents that will be included in your application is going to be a transcript. And that transcript that will be included will reveal to the officer if you were going to school or not. It will reveal to the officer if you took time off school or not. And if you are going to take more than 150 days from school, it is important that you work towards switching your status to a visitor or even leaving the country during that time. So this is something that we have seen get a lot of students in trouble where they are no longer eligible for their PGWP and even lose out on even extending their status. Like we have clients now where we're begging IRCC to just allow them back into the country to finish 3 classes so that they can graduate, just because when they applied for that extension, they had taken more than enough, more time off school. So it's really important. This is so important. You don't want to miss it. When in doubt, speak with IRCC, speak with the International Student Office, and ensure that you are compliant with this policy so that everything you've worked hard for just doesn't go to waste because you took time off and did not know what you were supposed to do with it. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So just to add on to what Florence was saying, not every single situation is considered to be an authorized leave. There are very specific examples that schools and IRCC both take into consideration. So the biggest thing, and what I want to reiterate in terms of what you said, Florence, is have it in writing. Have it in writing. If it's a phone call and it comes down to you getting an ADR or PFL and you have to explain yourself, you don't have any proof of it. So have all this information in writing. When it comes to traveling outside of Canada, a lot of people don't understand that a study permit and a TRV are not the same thing. So the easiest way to explain it is permits are printed. They're physical pieces of paper. The TRV is stamped into your passport, right? So the TRV is what allows you in and out of Canada. The study permit is what's giving you status inside of Canada as a student that allows you to study, right? So not always does IRCC issue TRVs to the full duration of your program. For whatever reason, maybe your TRV was only given for X amount of time and your actual study permit is still valid. That means you can continue to remain in Canada because your study permit is valid. However, if you leave the country and you don't have a valid stamp in your passport, they will not allow you back in the country. They won't let you back in. Although you have status in the country, you have your valid study permit. If you don't have a valid TRV, you're not getting back into Canada. So it's really important to be able to distinguish the two. They're very different. They have very different purposes. Anytime you do want to travel, number one, make sure you're allowed. You're not taking any unnecessary time off school. If it is going to be an authorized leave for yourself, have it in writing. And make sure your actual TRV is valid.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had situations where people have called us because they took time off school and were outside the country and trying to travel back in and we're not allowed to board that plane. Especially we're getting close to the holidays, so people are planning their trips to go home. I don't know what the current processing time for getting that TRV in Canada is, but it is pretty quick. So you want to, if you're thinking about leaving Canada in December here to visit family and travel and take a break, make sure you have your TRV to allow you entry back into Canada. All
Absolutely.
right.
I'll also add this. So when you apply for your initial study permit, when you get approved, you get the passport request. They actually stamp the visa in your passport. However, if you're applying for anything inside of Canada, whether it's a study permit extension, your postgraduate work permit, anything that you apply for in terms of an extension of status is not, they don't send a passport request. The passport request is a one-time thing that happens when you're applying for your first study permit outside of Canada. So in the future, if you do apply for an extension, don't assume they're going to give you a visa. You have to apply for that separately.
Yeah, you have to apply for that separately. Absolutely. Thanks for clarifying. So you can see that with immigration, there's just a lot, especially when you're in country, and it takes it takes a little miss to completely be on the other side of the law. So you want to be careful at all times with that as well. Well, September just passed. And we have also seen situations where students arrive in Canada, were supposed to start school in September, and for whatever reason decided not to start school. A lot of times there are good reasons for that, but when it comes to IRCC, no reason is a good reason if you got a study permit to come into Canada to study. So you have to know that if you are deferring your enrollment and you're already in Canada, you're deferring, you have to be planning to start school within 150 days. Your school should be notified, and I would add, update IRCC. Let IRCC know that you have deferred your admission to a different start date to start studying. So you don't just want to defer your admission and then start working. If you come in and you defer your admission, you cannot start working, even if your study permit says that you can work. This is another miss that people have done, where you start working when you're not supposed to. So if you've deferred, your school needs to know, get something in writing, IRCC needs to know, and you need to plan to start school within 150 days. If not, change your status or leave Canada, just so that you're not contradicting you're not contravening any of the policies.
Perfect. Okay. And this is another really important thing, extending your study permit, extending your status. So ideally, at minimum, what you want to do is apply for your study permit within 30 days of its expiry. At the absolute bare minimum, apply for that permit before it expires. So IRCC uses UTC time. So that's something to know. You don't want to apply on the day that your permit expires. You don't want to apply the day before the permit expires. The portal goes down. The portal goes down at the worst possible times, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Sometimes they have scheduled maintenance. Sometimes it's just down for no reason. So apply at least 30 days before, but obviously the sooner the better. If you can apply earlier, it's really important that you do that. I find a lot of our students find themselves in bad situations when it comes to their extension because of their passport. Your passport is expiring. You're not able to have your passport extended in time, whatever the case is. Number one, ensure that you extend your passport sooner rather than later, because a permit cannot be issued further than the validity of your actual passport. So if your passport is expiring, you might find yourself in trouble. So number one, ensure you extend that passport as soon as possible. Extend your status in Canada before at least 30 days before it expires.
Absolutely, very important. And I would just add there too, because there was a case that came to us where the students did not extend their status on time because their passport had expired and they had not renewed their passport. They didn't have the ability to renew their passport. So they felt that they could not submit an application. So I just want you to know, if you're in that situation, don't wait to renew your passport before you submit an application for extension. Use that passport that has expired in your application. Include an explanation to IRCC, in addition with proof that you are doing the work to actually get that passport renewed, and submit your extension. Have that extension in before your status expires so that you don't get in trouble, because they will not forgive it. We've literally seen a GCMS note where the officer said they could have applied with the expired passport and offered an explanation. So I'm telling you, this is not information you see online or on IRCC's website, but of course this comes from experience. So when in doubt, you just want to get more information, but don't get out of status, because it complicates so many other things.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the good thing with applying while you're, while your permit is still valid is you maintain the conditions in your study permit. You can continue studying, you can continue working. But if you fall within the restoration period, so let's say your permit expires, you have 90 days to restore. When you're in a restoration period, you have to stop studying, you have to stop working, you have to stop everything. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is apply ahead of time so you maintain your status.
Yeah, absolutely. Work regulations.
Do you want to take this one or should I?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So with the working on campus, when you work on campus, that's the only time that you can work more than 40 hours, funny enough, as international student. There's no restriction when you get a job on campus and you're doing it. So always check the definition of what IRCC considers campus on your campus. So check with your international students office for that. But working off campus is still 20 hours per week. IRCC promised us 24 hours in September, but this has not been implemented at this time. So please do not work more than 20 hours. IRCC has ways of verifying. They could call your employer to send a report on how many hours you're working. They could through CRA. There are different ways that they can verify what they need to. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation, because this is another reason why statuses don't get extended or PGWP are not, people become ineligible for PGWP, working more than the hours that are allotted. And I think we've been talking about this all through what we've been saying so far, so we're just going to touch on it again.
Absolutely. So first one, delayed program start. So let's say you're supposed to start school in September, came to Canada, you didn't start in September. You didn't change your status. You didn't leave the country. You've just sat in Canada up until maybe May, right? So the wording is you need to continue your studies within 150 days or the next semester, whichever one comes sooner. So in your situation, if you came for September, you didn't start in September, you need to start by January. January is the next semester. If you exceed January, change your status. Change your status either to a visitor, worker, if you're eligible to change to worker, or leave Canada. If you don't, you're going to find yourself in trouble.
Yeah. And and then arriving Canada without attending school, we talked about that. That is pretty popular. And it's also the reason why IRCC just gets so strict with everything, because people thought IRCC thought people were coming for school, and then they arrive and they're not going to school. So one of the things that you want to avoid is being that type of situation. Instead of staying here and being out of status, you're better off going back home and then coming back when you're actually ready to start the program and study. So it's really important, because it just takes something little to really ruin the whole process as well for everyone. Okay, so we're going to touch on PGWP eligibility as well here. This is what you see on the screen is what the eligibility is right now summarized. We know that effective November 1st, you need a language test. There were certain fields that need to be tied to area of labor demand in Canada for you to be eligible. Bachelor's, master's, doctorate program are completely still eligible no matter what you study, no matter the field of study. And that's quite a bit. That's a lot. There's a lot of opportunities still there to be eligible for PGWP, but you need to be aware of these other ones and the fact that you need to have your IELTS now. So with those IELTS and planning, and the next slide here, Asha is going to be talking about the general eligibility for PGWP. You need to plan ahead, right? Because you want to register for. The good thing with the IELTS here is that you could use it towards your PR plans and also your PGWP application as well. So it's very, very important, and your compliance with your study permit regulations and obligation is going to really determine if you're eligible for a PGWP amongst other requirements that IRCC has set out.
Okay, perfect. So a couple different types of general eligibility. The first one is completing a program at a DLI. So what I will say is not every single program at a DLI is PGWP eligible. Before all of this came into effect, it was always that way. We had programs where you get approved for a study permit, but you would not get approved for PGWP because the school or the program was not PGWP eligible. So step number one is you complete your program at a DLI that's PGWP eligible. Obviously, now we have different requirements, so it's going to have to be in line with one of the eligible fields of study. The second thing is you need to maintain full-time status during your studies. The only exception to this, as Florence mentioned earlier, is the final semester. The final semester, if you have part-time studies, that's allowed. But if you have part-time studies at any other point in time, there's a chance your PGWP application may get refused, because when you look at the document checklist for a PGWP application, what they want to see is your completion letter, and they also want to see your transcript. Your transcript is how they're going to determine what your course load was like, right? And we have seen officers actually go through and they really look at the transcripts. You'll see GCMS notes and they'll say, this student was, maybe they did, let's say, a 4-semester program. The first semester they did full-time. The second semester they did part-time. The third semester they did full-time. And the fourth semester they did part-time. They will go in and list out exactly which semesters you did full-time, which ones you did part-time. So the best way to avoid all of this is just maintain your full-time course load until that final semester, and then you should be fine. Number 3, you want to apply within 180 days of graduation. So that day that you get your official completion letter, the clock starts ticking, right? So there's 2 things to note here. The clock starts ticking there. Number 2, you have to stop working, right? So the day you get your official completion letter, you finish school, you have to stop working up until the day you apply for your PGWP and you get that interim work authorization letter. So obviously, the sooner you apply, the better, just because you don't want to find yourself in an awkward situation or in a situation where you're tempted to work and you can't. So the best thing you can do is, as soon as you get your official completion letter and your transcript, apply for your PGWP. Number 4, do you want to add on?
Yeah, so with that particular one, is the tip is you already know you're going to apply for PGWP. Start working on the application so that the completion letter comes, you add it, you send it in, life doesn't change for you, especially if you have a job, right? So those are ways that you can mitigate that as well.
Absolutely. Number 4, hold a valid study permit during the 180 days after graduation. So when you're applying for your PGWP, in order to kind of maintain those conditions and be allowed to continue working, get that interim work authorization letter, at some point you have to have that valid study permit. So another thing that you guys should know is, despite the date that's printed on your study permit, it's going to be invalid within 90 days, right? So you don't want to find yourself, yes, you have 180 days to apply for a PGWP, but within those 90 days of you completing your studies, your study permit is no longer valid. So again, apply sooner rather than later. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're kind of out of status there, right? And then the last one is just meet all the general eligibility requirements. So all of the things that we've touched on here, obviously the ones that we touched on before, the eligible fields of study, the CLB requirements, and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to throw in something there. One of the things that we're noticing that IRCC is questioning in applications to are students who have come to Canada and they were supposed to complete a 4-year program, and the program has taken 6-7 years. They are students like that, and when you later come in to apply, and this is not for PGWP right now, I'm talking about study permit extension, we are seeing a lot of pushback from IRCC for extending these types of students. So if you're in Canada, you're studying, you're looking to switch program, there have been delays that happen, there are reasons why you just couldn't complete your program in the given time slot. You don't just throw in an application for an extension. You need to go prepared with a lot of explanation to convince the officer that you were indeed a genuine student and you're going to be a genuine student if this extension comes in as well, and explain what happened and why you've not been able to complete your program like you should have. So all of this really ties together to provide information when it comes to what you have to do as a student and how it plays into future and other applications that you need to do. And of course, your PGWP eligibility as well. Okay. So I think for most of that's most of what we wanted to talk about, the key things. Just remind everybody, we wanted it to be short and sweet, that you can watch this, you can share this with your friends. If you have any questions about what your options are, what you're eligible for, you know exactly what that is and how you can handle that. So what we're going to do here now is, I can see there have been questions as we've been talking, but we're going to open the floor now to questions. Asha will take questions on StreamYard. I'll bring questions over from Instagram. So we're going to do this. We have about 30 minutes. We're going to answer some questions here in the next 30 minutes. And of course, as usual, if your questions don't get answered here, you do have our contact details. I'll put that back on the screen. You can reach out to us. You can send an email. You can call the office. You can reach out to us on our social media platform. We're more than happy to work with you and direct you on what you need to do to maintain your status here. Okay, so the floor is open for questions. So leave your questions and we're going to take it from there.
Okay, I think we have one.
You go ahead, Asha.
So, Zobi has a question. What if my passport covers the PGWP period, but that of my dependents have a shorter expiry than mine and the PGWP time? Guys, I don't know why people think this. I'm not directing this at you or your question. A lot of people feel like they extend their own status, but they don't have to extend the status of their dependents. I don't know how that notion came about. It's something that I've heard a lot during consultations in various sessions with various individuals. But if you extend the status of your dependents, it doesn't matter if they're minor children or however old they are, their status also needs to be extended. So if your children in this situation have a shorter expiry than you, renew their passports, apply for their extensions to match up with yours. Anytime that you're looking at an expiry date on a permit, whether it belongs to you, whether it belongs to your spouse, whether it belongs to your children, there is an expiry date. The day that expiry date comes, that person is out of status. You don't want that. So apply in this situation for them to renew their passports and apply for an extension. I don't know if your dependents have a shorter time than yours because of their passports or whatever the case is. Again, a permit can only be issued to the validity of your passport. So maybe their passports expire sooner than yours. I don't know what the case is, but either way, extend the passports, extend their status.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Adelpi. There's a question here on Instagram. I can't put those ones on screen, but it says, I have a question. I'll finish my BSc degree in December 2004. My current study permit expires January 11th. Would it be best to extend my SOP or apply for PGWP with an explanation letter? So technically, you're finishing this December and your study permit expires in January. So you have everything you need to apply for your study permits. Apply for your study permit. Apply for your PGWP before the study permit expires is what would be. But remember, even if your study permit expires, the situation you get into is that even if you apply, you're not going to be able to work. But you can still apply because you're within the 180 days. But if you want to stay in Canada and maybe be able to find a job and work, you want to try to apply before January 11th when the study permit expires. Okay. Go ahead, Asha.
Okay. Can you speak to any additional requirements for someone that has a spouse who is on an open work permit? There's no specific additional requirements for somebody who's on a spouse open work permit. If you have an open work permit, there's no restriction in terms of hours that you can work. The only thing I will say is be strategic. If you're a student and your spouse holds a work permit, please, they might be the one to get you to PR. If your long-term goal is transitioning to PR, maybe your spouse is going to be the one to get you there. So have them get a job that's skilled. That might count towards CEC. That might be eligible under one of our various provincial nominee programs. So no specific additional requirements, just the tip there. Have them get in the pool, get that Canadian work experience, needs to be skilled, whatever the case is. Just explore both your options. But no requirements there.
Yeah, and I'll add that, Asha, because there's no requirements. It's to manage it really well. But I don't know what direction this question was probably going. But if your spouse is a student and is about to graduate and apply for a PGWP, please note that you would not be eligible for an extension of your spousal open work permit if your spouse does not have a job. So what we typically would advise our clients whose spouses are students is your spouse extension is dependent on you getting a job. So while you're graduating, you want to actively be looking for a job as well, so that when he or she is applying for the PGWP, you can apply together. Now, if she doesn't have a job by the time she's applying for her PGWP, you don't have to apply, except your status is expiring as well. Then you need to apply to change your status to a visitor until she then gets a job and has her pay slip, then you can then go in and apply for that spousal home work permit. So it's really, really important to have that really figured out, because that becomes a challenge as well. Okay, perfect. Oh, this person said, I chose the hardest course, which I am kind of regretting. I failed a particular course and I can't graduate without passing the course. As an international student, it could jeopardize my status. So I guess just so you know, you're not the only person that has come and struggled through a class and struggled through a program. As long as you're able to go back and retake that program, it should be fine. It's okay and understandable and cleared out of your profile and all of that. So speak with your international students department and see what they can do for you, because there are always workarounds. There are always things that can be done so that you pass that program so that you can graduate as well. So don't just keep it to yourself. And I find that a lot of times many people end up in trouble because they're scared to ask or scared to go to the right channel to get the right advice. Don't go by what friends are saying or what people are doing, because everyone's situation is unique. And you want to speak to people who have experience and have seen various situations to be able to advise you. So go to your international student department, speak to them, because for all you might know, there may be solutions and workarounds for you so that you can eventually graduate. So I do wish you the very best. I know how it can be difficult sometimes when you're in that fix, but don't give up. Just talk to someone and talk to your professors as well. Okay, Asha?
Okay. About number 3, does that mean once you get the completion letter and apply for PGWP, there is no wait time when you're working, or you must stop working completely until that authorization comes in? I always say it's better to be safe than sorry. Wait until you get the interim work authorization letter. It comes pretty immediately, like usually within a day. So I would recommend waiting until you get that letter. Make sure you meet all the other eligibility requirements, such as holding that valid study permit at the time that you're applying. And then from there, you should be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good question. What if a student work more than 20 hours a week? Should he or she forget PGWP? Honestly, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I would say your likelihood is pretty slim to get it. And it would really depend on how critical and how detailed the officer that is working on your application is. It is once you've done that, you've contravened the law. So it would be difficult, but you might find situations where an officer did not look closely and still approved an application. Doesn't mean that it's right. Doesn't mean that it's correct. So it is an unfortunate situation to be in, and it does impact your eligibility for that PGWP as well. Someone said, so please, I have to stop work the week I graduate. So for you to continue working under the policy, and this is right on the IRCC website, you should have submitted an application for your PGWP. So you need to plan that well, just like I said, have your documents ready, have your final transcripts, have your letters from your school, let your schools know, so they get this thing out to you on time so that you can submit that application for that PGWP on time so that you can continue working. Okay, go ahead, Asha.
I think this one's a similar question. Do you stop working when you finish your final exams in school or when your transcripts/results are ready? I think that's based on when you get the official completion letter. That's my interpretation. Yeah, or when you get your final transcript. When you get like the first official final something from your school, stop working, whatever it is.
Stop working if you've not submitted your PGWP. So, like, I'll stress this again and over again. You know you're going to apply for PGWP, so get that application done. Have it ready so that the moment we had a client like that last year, we had everything done and we're just waiting to slot in her letter. The moment the letter came, it was in. She continued working. We submitted the application. So you want to have a strategy like that in place for yourself to be able to apply. All right. If you came in to do a 2-year program but changed school and started a 1-year program, do you need to still alert IRCC when you start your second program? I would say, and this is from Instagram, I would say it's absolutely very important to keep IRCC in the know as you're changing anything about your program of study. just send a quick web form. I've updated. This is where I am. This is my school. This is what I'm doing now. It just keeps things clean. It keeps things on record. Because when you're doing an application again, all of these things are going to come back into play with an officer that's reviewing your application. So just always update IRCC. Okay.
For students whose PGWP is expiring and PNP is in progress, what are the possible ways to maintain status while I await PNP nomination? So number one, some of our provinces have different work permit extensions that they've put into place. I think Alberta did it. I believe Manitoba did it. I don't know where you're located, but see if that's something that could apply to you. If it's not something that applies to you, speak to your employer, see if it's possible to pursue other avenues such as the LMA. If that's not a availability, then what you need to do is transition from worker to visitor. You want to maintain your status in Canada at all times.
Yeah, and for me as well, I would just say one other thing that you could be doing for students whose PGWP is expiring and PNP is in progress. So that means you already have a PNP application that you have in progress. There's not much that you can do there. Now, the other thing too, I've seen, and I'm sharing this so that you're aware, we've seen situations where our clients have PNP in progress and they received an ITA. So is there something that you need to do to update your profile? And in this particular client situation, of course, when they received an ITA, it was end with the PNP, because with an ITA, you're applying straight for permanent residence and you'll be eligible for something called a bridging open work permit. So in this climate that we're in, you don't want to put your eggs in one basket. So you want to be exploring all available options that you can look at to see, is it possible? Is there anything I could do to get an ITA in the next couple of draws or something, if that's an option? Because then if you get that, you know that when you submit that PR application, you are straight eligible to apply for a PGWP if you meet all the other conditions. This is in addition to what Asha has already said. LMI is always still a valid option if your employer wants to do that for you. But if all else fail, get your status to be a visitor just to remain in Canada if that's what you want and you don't want to leave the country while your PNP is being processed. Okay? Perfect. Oh, so Chrissy has a question here on Instagram, and I'm going to read it because it's something that is very common. She said, I took part-time classes in 2 major semesters and had some withdrawn due to diagnosed health issues. In what way would my PGWP be affected? First off, I hope you're feeling better. I hope you're doing better. I hope you're recovering well. It is always difficult. Life happens, and I do tell people we're living life, and that life that happens to you needs to be clearly articulated in your application to IRCC. The first thing that I would say is, if you did not take a leave, an official leave, just like we talked about, from your school when you took that time off, go back into school and see what you had done. How did you notify the school of the time that you took off? And were you able to? Because there are some times when you're sick that you cannot even do anything. Do you have doctor's notes, doctor's report to support your illness and the time that you took off? Your application for PGWP is not going to be a regular PGWP application. It's going to be one that will have to explain and provide the officer convincing reasons why you were not in school and you did not comply with study permit regulation like you should have. Now, you do have a good reason from what I'm reading, but it needs to be documented well with enough supporting documents in your application. So I wouldn't really outrightly say that you can't get a PGWP because you had that, but I would say that you would need to look carefully and package your application well and have enough supporting documents to really make a case for yourself. All right? Okay, Asha. Asha, go ahead with the next question on StreamYard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Can I get my postgraduate work permit after my study of a year, or will I need to enroll for another study course? So it depends on, I always say, what does your eligibility look like for PR? That's where you want to start, right? Like if you have a decent score in terms of express entry and you've kind of forecasted what your score is going to look like after you complete your education, you're in the high 500s. You're pretty confident in maybe getting an ITA or being able to apply for a PNP. maybe 1 year is going to be enough time to transition from student to PR. However, if you've looked at your options and you're like, okay, my score is not where it needs to be, PMP is not looking the best, I don't know if I'll be able to transition in a year, do a second program. Do a second program if you can afford it, right? Because what we're looking at is 1 year PGWP versus 3-year PGWP. That's still the case right now. So I would say it depends on your eligibility for PR. That's where I would, and it really comes down to the province as well. What does your PMP look like? Are you in a province that's a little bit more PR friendly? Are you in a province that's a little bit more competitive? There's a little bit of various factors that go into determining it. But if you look at your options and you think 1 year is enough time, go ahead and apply for your PGWP. If you look at your options and you think 1 year is not enough time, it might be worth doing a second program.
Yeah. And I'll add there, remember, when you're going to do that second program, the landscape of things have changed. One of the things that we don't know now, I think I've read somewhere, but I've not seen it officially on IRCC's website yet. And we'll wait to see that before we say it out or confirm it to be truth. But you know now that it was study permits apply. If you submitted your study permit application before November 1st, the old rules apply. So no matter the program you graduate from, you will be eligible for PGWP for the duration of the program, and as long as the school was a DLI that was issuing PGWP at the time. Now, any study permit application that is done after November 1st, now you have to be in a program that is PGWP eligible. From what we understand, is even if someone was in country, there's speculation that it would impact those that are even doing an extension to take a new program or something. So that new program you're taking has to be a program that is aligned with the areas of labor shortage, especially if it's a PGD program or a diploma program. So it's very, like, the landscape of things has shifted a lot right now. So you need to, before it was just, I need a second program to get 3 years, I'm just going to take any. But no, now you have to be, don't just go take any, because you might spend all that money and not be able to actually get a PGWP. So you need to be very strategic about that option. And I would say use that time to not just take a program. If you have to, use that time to explore, not just it, especially because if you're wanting to take a second program, that means you love Canada and you want to be here long term. So take that time before you register to start that new program to do a deep assessment of what your PR options look like. So then you could be more strategic. Maybe there's a province that you could take that second program that could make it easier for you to get to permanent residence and access more pathways. You want to have that discussion first before you just jump in and sign up for that second program. Yeah. Okay. All right. I hope we're answering your questions. We have about 15 minutes left, so we're going to keep going. Great questions so far from everyone. There's another one here. Someone said, and I'll pick this too, because it's nice to pick questions that are unique so that everybody learns something. You mentioned IELTS, but I have heard of CELPIP. Does that work as well? Yes, IRCC has 3 approved language tests: IELTS, CELPIP, and PTA, I believe. Those are the ones that are approved, so you could take any of those. I would say I've heard most people say CELPIP was pretty good to them.
Everybody says CELPIP is easier. I don't know how true that is, though.
Yeah, all the times I had to write IELTS, language test was IELTS. So I have actually seen our clients where they struggled a lot with IELTS and then they do CELPIP and they do really well. And it's not because they can't speak English. They're actually excellent, pretty good English speakers, but that's what we've noticed. So prepare for them and do the one that gets you the highest score. I will give you one extra tip. For PGWP, it's a CLB 7. Don't go for a CLB 7. Please earn for a CLB 10, because you always want to maximize your chances of receiving an ITA when it comes time for you to explore PR and all of that. Yeah. Asha?
Okay. What if my TRV expires and I have a valid study permit and I do not intend to leave Canada anytime soon? Do I need to apply for another TRV in Canada or apply for a visitor visa? If you don't plan on leaving the country, there's no need to apply for a TRV. So TRV and visitor visa are the same thing. It's just terminology. It's the stamp in the passport. It's virtually the same thing. But if you are sure you don't plan to go anywhere, you're fine to remain in Canada as long as your study permit expires. But if you later on decide you want to travel, that's when you need to apply for your TRV.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect. And someone here on Instagram would there be an issue extending my study permits after deferral and changing DLI? That is a very, it's hard to, like, by virtue of changing your DLI and deferring, shouldn't be a reason why your study permit cannot be extended. Now, the additional question that I would need to know would be, what happened? Why did you defer? Were you in country? Did you uphold the status, the obligation as a student? Do you have enough money for this new program you're going for? Do you have a legit study plan as to why you're changing your program? Because even now, we're seeing IRCC refuse study permit extension because they're like, they don't think you need that program. Go home, you know? So you have to still come with a solid, the landscape of things have changed so much. You still have to come with a solid plan or as to why you're changing program, you're doing this new program. So just that a question alone is not enough to say you can't apply, you wouldn't be able to get an extension. It would be the overall package that would determine if you're still eligible for that study permit as well. Asha, go ahead.
Does the language requirement apply to old students or new students? Anybody who has applied for or is applying for a PGWP after November 1st needs to submit their language results.
Absolutely. Mercy, this is the exact reason why we're doing it, because honestly, there's been so much updates that people can't even keep up anymore with who it applies to and who it does not. And I bet we're going to see situations where PGWP will just be kicked out because there are people till today who don't know they need to write IELTS or language tests to do their PGWP. So unfortunately, it has changed. Everybody now has to do language tests to get those PGWP. So it is what is right now. The only thing, Mercy, you should know is that as long as you got your study permit before November 1st, you don't have to worry, especially if you're doing a PGD. If you are in line with area of labor shortage and all of that, you are still fine that way.
I think there's another question that basically touches on the same thing. So I think this is something that we need to clarify. So you mentioned that PGWP is automatic for university students. Number one, nothing is automatic. Let's just put that out there. But I do get what you're saying. So irrespective of their course of program. So if we go back here, right, you are studying Applied Business Management. That is a postgraduate diploma at University of Manitoba. The only thing where it's eligible fields of study, all eligible fields of study, bachelor, master's, doctoral. If it's not a bachelor, if it's not a master's, and it's not a doctoral degree, you have to be in an eligible field of study. However, in your situation, you have already applied for and received your study permit before November 1st. So you're okay. Based on what I'm seeing right now, you should be fine. The only thing that you need to do is write your English, right?
English,
so, it's not just being in a university, which means I'm fine. Yes, it's the University of Manitoba, but it's the type of diploma or degree that you're graduating with.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very important. And so there are a couple of things you need to know. When did I apply for my study permit? If you apply for your study permit before November 1st of 2024, all you need to do now is write the language test to get a PGWP. If you apply for your study permit after November 1st, this is applied, not got. It's literally applied. If you apply after November 1st, then all of these things we have on screen is what you need to now check. The next thing is, am I eligible? What level of program did I study? And is my education in the field of labor shortage? That's what you need to know. And the schools are doing a fantastic job right now. So you guys are aware. Our school admission team is receiving daily. We're getting lists from schools because they have started aligning immediately with those 906 occupations that are in demand and aligning their programs so that as you're selecting programs to study now, you know if your program is eligible. So if you're already a student here or you've already received admission and all of that, you don't want to check, you can go now. The schools are doing a fantastic job of updating in quick, really quick turnaround time for students. Okay? All right. So what if I applied for, there's a question on Instagram here. What if I apply for extension of spousal open work permit and you get refused? How long does the restoration of status take for it to be approved? So sorry to hear about the refusal for the spousal open work permit. I think my first question there would be First off, if it's refused, you typically have 90 days to apply for restoration. A common reason why we see spousal open work permits in country extensions refused is because maybe the spouse had applied at the time when they didn't hold a job. And by the time the refusal comes, they now have a job, so you can apply. There's no specific timeline for restoration of status. It will just depend on the processing time on IRCC's website for that particular stream of application. We've actually not checked this week what processing time is, but we will probably have a post up on processing time. So it's really just a waiting game. And I always tell people sometimes that's the sad thing when these things happen, because now that they've been refused, they're out of status, they can't work anymore. We had a situation where a whole family was refused, and it was simply because the transcript was not included in the PGWP application. Immediately that refusal happened, the PGWP applicant had to stop working. The spouse had to stop working because they refused the whole family. So imagine that source of income for that whole family completely cut off just by one simple mistake. And it's just to let you guys know, IRCC is not merciful at all these days. That's something that I would appreciate if IRCC, a visa officer, wrote to the applicant and say, hey, you forgot your transcript, send it to us, because that student has it. They had the completion letter, but just missed that. So really, really important that you make sure that you are completing your application properly. Assess the risks that what could go wrong if it's not done properly as well. Okay. All right. Perfect. I shall go ahead.
Okay. I feel like a lot of our questions are kind of repetitive here. I'm trying to find one that's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Okay. This one's interesting. For a new admitted student, do I need IELTS as a supporting document for a study permit application? Comes down to which country you're applying from.
Mm-hmm.
So
which country you're applying from, yeah.
Absolutely. Some countries require English, some of them don't. So just refer to document checklist for your region.
Yeah, so check. And yeah, so most times I'm seeing the name, of course, Kalu. If you apply from Nigeria, you probably don't need language test scores. But we always like to keep it open because you could be anywhere, you could be from anywhere. And so it's always best to check the document checklist to make sure that it applies. A lot of times, applicants from the Asian region, India, China, most times will typically be required to have language test scores in the application. So it's important that you do that as well. Okay. All right. So a lot of same questions, but I'm going to answer one that's different here. Can I get a study permit as a visitor here in Canada? Absolutely. Yes, you can. We've had a lot of our clients like that. People who've come to visit and then realize they can study and stay back. We actually have an article on our website on this. So you can certainly apply, but I'll let you know, you have to explain yourself well. You have to explain how you went from visitor to student. Very important. So your application is not just a regular study permit application. It has to be convincing to the officer why you want to change status, do something else, go into another different pathway for your application. There's another short one here. Secondly, is it possible to apply for PGWP and SOWP at the same time? You can apply at the same time if the PGWP applicant holds a full-time job at the time that you're both applying. If they don't have a job, then you may not be able to apply at the same time. You have to wait till they have a paying job. Then you, the spousal open work permit applicant, can then apply at that time. Asha.
Okay, this one's an interesting one. I have an open work permit that expires September 2026, but my study permit expires same. But she will finish September 2025. Do I stop working in September 2025 also? No, you can continue to work until your work permit expires. So with spousal open work permits, if you look online, IRCC has done an amazing job at laying out, in terms of your work permit that was initially tied to your spouse who was a student, regardless of if they complete their education early, in situations of divorce, in situations of separation, it doesn't matter. You can continue to work. You continue to maintain your status up until the day your permit expires.
Yeah, so you're good. How did you get that lucky? That's really that's a unique situation.
No. What he's saying is they were issued same time. They have the same validity. She's finishing early.
She's finishing her program. Okay, that's what happened.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how did you get that? Yeah. It happens when you see the officer do something and you're like, that's unique.
How did that happen? Oh yeah.
I see where that came from. Okay, that's good. All right.
Do you have one?
Yes, I do have one. Oh, you can go ahead if you have one.
Okay, this one. So LMIA cannot access a work permit within Canada. So why the option of LMIA? So I do want to clarify, there are specific people who can apply for a work permit inside of Canada. If you already are holding a valid study permit or you're already holding a valid work permit, you are still allowed to apply for a work permit from inside the country. If you're in a situation where maybe you had to transition to visitor, then you cannot. But if you're still in a period where you're holding your PGWP, if you're able to get that LMIA, you can apply for your work permit inside the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's honestly all a timing thing for a lot of applicants and just making sure that things work well and align well. We are such in a different time for things. And funny that Taiwo asked that question, because prior to all of these changes that have happened, as long as you got that LMIA, even if you were a visitor, you could actually literally go to the border and get your work permit issued to you. But right now, they have specifically laid out certain things and who can go to the border to apply for that work permit or even apply from inside of Canada. So the landscape of things have changed quite a bit here. All right.
Final question. We've got about
4 minutes left here. There's so many questions and so many good ones as well. I do know, I think before, honestly, I won't take another question at this point, but we just want to wrap up. Just give ourselves 2 minutes here. I will wrap up. There is a lot happening, and it is very important that, first off, take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, take it easy, and just figure out what you need to figure out for every single day. It is complicated. We do this every day, and it is challenging as well to keep up with all the policies. But we want you as international students that are in the country to know what you need to know for yourself. So we put in a lot of efforts to put out sessions like this, educate on our social media pages, our Instagram, where we'll put out the announcements when it's there, ask questions, leave comments as much as we can, we'll answer, but know what you need to know for yourself. For now, and I just want everybody to know when their status expires. If you're a student, I just want you to know what you need to do to get to PGWP. When you finish those two, then you can now start asking yourself, okay, how can I get to PR? So just take it one step at a time so that you don't get overwhelmed. It might look like, oh, Canada, the doors are shutting, the doors are closing right now, but there's still a lot of people that are achieving success in the same place. So focus your energy, focus on what's positive, focus on the opportunities that exist, and retarget your efforts. One of the things that you don't want to do is get out of status. As much as you can, don't do that. People say, oh, employers don't want to support, but there are employers that if you walk to and you're giving them the best of your time, you're adding value to them, may be willing to do things to keep you and all of that. So look at all options that are available for you, but the most important thing, information is key. So getting the right information at the right time. Don't wait until you're about to get out of status and you don't have any option, then you start running around looking for help. Get help as soon as possible. Know your options before you even graduate. And that's typically what we do with consults. You can lay out that action plan to you, like this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to do next, so that you know what you need to do in the process as well. Asha?
Just want to say, for a lot of our students, getting in the country was not easy. I'm sure if you've worked with us or if you've done a study permit application by yourself, you know the amount of work that goes into it. It's not a simple nor a straightforward application. Having to gather the funds, having to gain the admission, having to put together the application. For some people, having to apply multiple times, right? So the last thing that you want to do is, after going through all of that work, to come in the country and make a mistake. And it might not be a big deal, right? In the moment, maybe you're like, oh, I'm kind of exhausted. I'm not really feeling school. I'm going to take one semester off. But that could be the worst decision you've ever made. That could have been the decision that you made that threw away your chance at PR. Maybe that was the chance that cut your chances for PR in half, right? So after all the sacrifices you've made to get here, you don't want to come here and take it lightly. I think a lot of times, with our international students, maybe you're studying with Canadian citizens or permanent residents. The reality is it's not the same. Maybe they can take a part-time course load and be fine. You can't. So just remember all the sacrifices that you've made to get here, and don't do anything to mess it up, please. I beg you guys to know the conditions that are on your study permit. It's really disappointing to have consultations with individuals who are in situations where they contravene one of the conditions on their study permit, and now their study permit extension is refused, or maybe their PGWP application is refused. And when you're in a situation like that, the options to restore or have a solution is very slim. Like, there's not much that can be done. Once you make that mistake, for a lot of people, that's the end of the journey, right? So the best thing that we can say here is remember the sacrifice. Remember the sacrifice. Know that you're here for a reason. Canada is not closed. I know I had somebody speak to me and said, "Are they still approving applications?" Yes, they are.
Yeah.
The reality is we need immigration, regardless of what's happening politically, regardless of who's being scapegoated, regardless of who our immigration minister is or who our prime minister is. We need immigration. Canada has an aging population, right? We need immigration. We'll always need immigration. So do whatever you can to make sure you are on the right track. Don't stray off that track. Remember the sacrifice you've made, and God willing, it will work out for everybody.
Yeah. And yeah, final word, just stay positive through all the changes and everything that's going on. Stay positive, keep looking for the opportunities, and something will open up. The year is about to end, New Year is coming. Let's see what IRCC springs up on us. But Canada is not closed. I look at a lot of policies across the country, the UK, the US, Australia. Everybody is trying to tighten things and close things up. But when you look at what Canada has put out, there are still a lot of opportunities and still ways. You just need to be really focused on your own goals and how to achieve those. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. I hope you found something useful. We're going to reshare the portion where we're going to reshare this video. But again, the first 20-30 minutes was heavy on talking about the study permit eligibility, PGWP eligibility, study permit obligations, and PGWP eligibility. So if you missed it, I see questions from people just coming in. You can definitely watch that again and share this with your friends and students so that everyone is aware of what their obligations are. And of course, you know where to find us if you have any questions, need any professional guidance in processing your application. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.